All right, welcome back to RETCON. I hope you're having an awesome time so far. Our next talk will be led by Igor Popov. He's the chief economist at apartmentlist.com. Please join me in welcoming Igor to our virtual stage.
Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you virtually today, because we're all in this virtual remote world. I'm coming to you live from my living room. We've got a sleeping toddler down the hallway there. So if there's any wildness in the backdrop, forgive this Zoom presentation. But very happy to be with you today. My name is Igor Popov. I'm the chief economist at Apartment List, where I'm fortunate to lead a group of researchers who are excited by asking and answering questions in the rental market. And it has been a busy year because it has been a wild 2020, especially when it comes to renters, what they're looking for, what they want, what they don't want, and how that is changing in real time. So we've had a laser focus on trying to read the tea leaves in the data to try to tell us how renter preferences and needs have really been changing. And I'd love to just give a little bit of an overview of what we've been tracking, what we've been seeing, especially as it pertains to, when renters are moving, which has been changing, where renters are moving to, what they are trying to find in their next move, and then a little bit of speculation, of course, around what's next, which is the billion-dollar question or the elephant in the room. But I'll start with sort of the temporal nature of this year has been odd for those of us that have tracked the rental market for a while. When the first shelter-in-place orders were really starting to be announced and be released, we just saw rental search traffic in the whole industry, even you can tell this in kind of the Google Trends data, just fall off a cliff. People stopped moving essentially and stayed in place in March and early April. And we saw both renter traffic in the industry, as well as our measures of renter moving intent, basically drop significantly. But then what that did was it created somewhat of a coiled spring in the rental market that had really released a lot of pressure throughout the summer and is still continuing to release pressure today in the fall. So we saw essentially by late July and August, near record levels of movement and extremely high levels of renter intent, which we basically measure, you can imagine on a scale of window shopping to please get out of my way, I need to find my next apartment yesterday. Renter intent has gone up. And so what's going on here? We ran a survey nationwide back in June where we asked whether or not coronavirus has made people more or less likely to move in 2020. And so actually about 28% of people said that they were more likely to move this year because of the pandemic. And that is somewhat unusual for a recession year. But I think what was really telling were some of the reasons, because among that group, we basically split off into two primary reasons. One was essentially, I'm now planning an upgrade move I wasn't expecting. The other is I'm now planning a downgrade move I wasn't expecting. The top two reasons were even among, hey, I'm now in a more financially difficult situation and I need to move. But the same number of people were saying, hey, there are actually some opportunities out there for me now. And now I might be able to move into a better spot, a better apartment I didn't think I would be able to, given the state of where the market was last year. So both of these moves have been creating a bit of a reshuffling, a reconfiguration in the housing market, but it's also really affected where renters are going across space. And that's maybe the second thing to touch on, is really locations that are driving the heat in the rental market have really changed. When we try to look back to our 2019 selves, I think the main buzzwords at conferences were around walkability, sustainability, proximity, community, right? Community level amenities. And a lot of the heat in the market was really in the massive and emerging job centers, and even within those emerging job centers in walkable downtown areas. This is where both the economic opportunities of cities and the entertainment opportunities in cities were really driving a lot of the interest in the rental market, especially at the higher end of the rental market. Come 2020 and the pandemic, that all quickly changed, right? The benefits of cities and the transmission of face-to-face ideas and entertainment were shut off, and people started to reevaluate. So what have we basically seen? one, the places that were growing like crazy were the ones that have lost the most steam. So in the last 5 years, we've kept telling the story of the hottest markets are getting hotter. And that stopped being the case this year. Places we can see in our search data, kind of where people are moving to and from, or where they're planning moves to and from, as kind of a leading indicator of moves. And we see just tremendous shifting away from, especially the coastal job hubs and the emerging tech hubs. So the coastal job hubs, I'm thinking New York, LA, San Francisco. That's of course been reflected in massive rent drops and rent concessions in those areas, but also a lot of heat taken off of the Denvers, Austins, Nashvilles of the world. These were places where just last year, almost half of the search activity in those emerging mid-sized tech hubs was coming from outside of those areas. You know, they were drawing in a wild number of renters throughout the course of the year, and those markets have cooled off substantially. The markets that have really started to heat up are places that have been, you know, near the big job centers, but not directly within them. So on the West Coast, places like Sacramento, Riverside. On the East Coast, places like Virginia Beach, or even Philadelphia, you know, a large city in its own right, but has been drawing a lot of renter interest from New York and DC. And so what does this all mean? It means we've been seeing a pretty strong convergence in essentially action in the rental market. That's certainly what we see in our data, that if you take the places that were the hottest and the priciest before we entered the pandemic, those were the places that have fallen the most in terms of their rents and in terms of their rental demand. And you look at the places that hadn't received much attention and were not really in the spotlight, those are places that renters are really giving a new look to. We are also seeing this within metros as well. And so one of the exercises that we've recently done is, you know, we take all of the rent data that we have for the largest metros in the country, and let's organize them by, okay, the core cities, you know, so, you know, if we're thinking about the Seattle metro, we're thinking Seattle, and the outer suburbs, so Spokane and other suburbs. And do this for the, you know, 30 largest metros for which there are, you know, suburban and core central cities. You actually see a big divergence here where the core cities continue to fall precipitously. So you look over those top 30. By October, we were essentially a kind of 6% year over year rent decline on average across all those central cities, whereas the suburbs have actually rebounded back to pre-pandemic levels already as of even a month ago. And so while the stories about coastal cities and gateway markets falling in rent and urban exodus is sort of dominating the headlines, there are a huge number of markets that have gained in rent prices throughout the pandemic and are actually getting a lot more online eyeballs on them than they used to. You know, and I'm thinking again, places like Sacramento, places like Boise, that have places like Bakersfield and Riverside in California that have been really heating up in a big way. And so this is really, yeah, like I said, it's really driving a convergence across space in the US. Now, once people get there, wherever they're trying to go, the places that they're, the types of leases that they're looking for and the types of amenities that they're looking for may have also changed, right? And one of the other big trends that we've been following in our, what I call our quiz data, because the way that our Apartmentless product works is you have, if a renter comes on, they're first asked a series of questions so that the platform and the program can really get a good sense of what each renter is searching for. One of the core questions, of course, we ask is, you know, what duration of lease are you looking for? And, you know, the standard is typically 12 months, and in normal times, the vast majority of our responses indicate the default 12-month lease. Well, in the pandemic, and especially in the recent sort of summer and fall months of the pandemic, we have seen significant growth in the number and the share of people that are coming on and saying that they want short-term leases. where I'm defining short-term leases as 6 months or fewer. Not traditional 12-month leases, but really, I think a big expression of the uncertainty that renters face in the market. And we actually have some preliminary evidence that not only are short-term leases or demand for short-term leases up across the board, they are especially high and growing, as much as on the order of 20, 30, 40%, depending on the, not in the share, but in terms of the percentage growth across regions. This is especially true for people leaving those big job centers. So if you look at people leaving places like San Francisco, Boston, and moving to those more affordable metros where maybe they were there for the job opportunities or amenities, but are waiting out the pandemic somewhere else, a lot of that uncertainty about, is my job going to be remote? When will the concert venues reopen? When will I be comfortable going back to my favorite small businesses again? All of that uncertainty is really manifesting in a disproportionate demand for short-term leases. So that continues to be something that we're tracking as well. Has the demand for amenities changed dramatically? Interestingly enough, not as much as I would have expected. If you are managing communities that have recently built pools and gyms, and you're wondering if all that demand for those community level amenities has dried up, it definitely has not. Same share of people are still searching for those amenities, somewhat surprisingly. So not all preferences have changed, but certainly along location and lease length, we've seen big shifts. What happens next really depends on what happens with the recession and how it continues to unfold, I think, especially in terms of how the small business community will react. But then the other huge factor, especially at the higher end of the rental market, will be what companies do about their long-term remote work policies. That is still, I think, being discussed by many companies. I don't think anyone has figured it out yet, but once they do, that will really affect the distribution of people across space, which of course is the central force within the rental market. So I'm very much looking forward to engaging with everyone in kind of the Q&A during the event. Hope everyone's staying safe and doing well. Thank you so much for taking the time here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Igor. We really appreciate all of your really awesome insights. All right. If you're looking for your next session, you can check out the agenda page to find out where you're going next, or take some time to do some virtual networking with one-on-one meetings with your peers. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.